though the Great Depression was so long ago and so many people suffered through it, there's a sense of nostalgia there. It was a simpler time, a simpler way of life, and there's so much to learn. Hi everybody, I'm Sarah. Today we're going to talk about the Depression era habits that we can learn from. Those habits that our parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents developed for living well, even though they didn't have a whole lot of money. Number one, this one is kind of interesting. No late night snacking. This means that after dinner and after you had your dessert and your coffee, the kitchen was closed. There was no popping in for ice cream or Doritos, a scoop of peanut butter, the chocolate that's hidden way back in the bottom of the cupboard from last Halloween. There was none of that. Once people sat down, they had their dinner, they had their dessert and their coffee, they were done for the night. This helped save money, and it also helped your health. People seem to be a little bit healthier. I mean, the health gurus are telling you these days not to eat after 6 o'clock at night. This was their habit. This was their way of life. They moved on after dinner. The lights were done, the kitchen was clean, and they were out. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're enjoying these videos. If you're finding them to be fun and you're learning a little something along the way, please subscribe. Also, if you really like them, hit that bell so YouTube will notify you and you won't miss out on any of the fun. Number two, read more. In 1935, public libraries were serving 60% of the population. People just read more. There were TVs. They were small. I mean, I think they were, gosh, this big. But most people couldn't afford them. So they read books. In the evening, especially in the winter when it got dark, they would have a small task light and they would sit and read. Not only did it serve as entertainment, but it passed the time, specifically on those cold, dark winter evenings, and also they learned things. It was an opportunity to further educate themselves. The third Depression era habit was to make your own coffee. Now, of course, we know that there wasn't a Starbucks, but there were small diners, restaurants, and there were places where you could go and get a cup of coffee. But those opportunities were few and far between. They made their coffee at home. They had 1 to 2 cups in the morning, and they may have had one after dinner with dessert. But that was it. They limited their consumption because coffee was one of those things that just wasn't cheap. Making their own coffee was one of the things that they did to live a simpler life. Number 4, pack a lunch. Now, my grandmother was born in 1926. She was 15 years old when the Great Depression ended. But the skills that she learned while growing up carried through her adulthood. These are the things that she still did after she got married and while raising her family. She packed my grandfather's lunch. My grandfather worked at a paper mill and he worked shift work, which meant when he was working 7 to 3, he got a packed lunch. 3 to 11, he got a packed dinner. And 11 to 7, he got lots of snacks. This is a habit that we can also carry through. Meal planning is a huge way to save money. It's a habit that you can get into to make your dollar stretch a little bit further. Meal prepping can happen on the weekends if you've got a super busy schedule in order to pack everything up so you can just kind of grab and go every morning before you leave for work. Now, granted, the temptation is always there to grab something fancy while everybody else is ordering out. However, maybe limit yourself to only 1 day a week to do that. If you can find some copycat recipes from your favorite restaurants or favorite takeout places, it'll really help to lessen the pain of watching everybody else order out. Number 5, let's go back to cloth napkins. I love cloth napkins. I have been using cloth napkins in our home for years. Somebody gave me a bunch of this cute little fabric that I was able to make some simple cloth napkins. Easy peasy on the sewing machine, sew a straight line, and you've got a perfectly good cloth napkin. Now, as you can see, the edges are starting to wear out. I did try to buy some other cloth napkins on Amazon that I really just didn't like. The moment I washed them, they got all crinkly and wrinkled. And then I have to iron them? Yeah, that's not gonna happen. So I did find these, and these are super cute. They're small, they're not very big. but they're really soft. And I don't think that they're gonna wrinkle up when you wash them. They came in 3 different colors. I got the multi-pack. There's an olive, there's a rust orange, and there's kind of a goldish yellow. So if you're not a sewer, this is a fantastic option. Again, did I mention how soft they were? As always, I'll leave a link in the comments to anything that I mention in this video. Number 6, wear it out. Use it until you just can't use it anymore. This goes for clothes, and it goes for anything else around the house. Many times in today's society, we see that when something happens to a shirt, it gets a stain, it gets a hole under the arms, it loses a button. People just donate it. They'd rather not mess with it. They'd rather just replace it. It is very simple to sew on a button. There are YouTube tutorials on how to do that. Instead of just tossing it in the donation bin, why not grab a YouTube tutorial, a needle, and some thread and learn to sew the button back on? When my grandmother had a family, her children passed down their clothes. So my mom, as the oldest, wore the clothes, then they were passed down to my Aunt Donna, and then they were even passed down to younger cousins. People just didn't get rid of clothes because of minor discrepancies. Similarly, things like sheets and towels. If you couldn't use them as a towel anymore because they had holes in them, then you just cut them up and use them for rags. Sheets are the same way. A fantastic way to take a set of sheets that's worn out is to use around the edges and create pillowcases out of them. Everybody could always use more pillowcases. Number 7, go back to the simpler foods. Not every dinner has to be a fancy gourmet meal. Let's go back to real wholesome foods. Just about every evening during the Great Depression, dinner was made. Rare were the times when people would go out to dinner. Now, many times they did gather. Big families gathered together to share a potluck, but dinners, normal, regular, everyday dinners were made at home, and they were made simply. Pork chops, mashed potatoes, and green beans. It couldn't get any simpler than that. In my family, we were Italian, so pasta was a huge thing. Also, the homemade wine was also a huge thing. A little bit of homemade sauce on some pasta with some meatballs, maybe some sausage, some garlic bread, and some salad from the garden, and you've got a wholesome, simple, delicious meal. Not only were the meals simple, but life was simple. Today, with kids' schedules, adult schedules, holidays coming up, everything just seems to be in such a rush. My great-grandparents would tell you to come in, sit down. Would you like a glass of wine or a cup of coffee? Pull out the cookies and just take a break. Enjoy life the way it's meant to be enjoyed for a while. Stop rushing around and relax. When my grandfather would come home from work on his 7 to 3 shift specifically, the two of them would always sit down for about 20 minutes to a half hour, talk about their day, and have a cup of coffee. I actually continued this tradition. My husband would get home depending on where he was working, between 3 and 4:30. We would always sit down, have a cup of coffee, and talk about our day. He would go on about something that happened at work that I had no idea what he was talking about, and I would fill him in on what happened with the boys and where we were in our lives. It was a really nice time. It was just a time for us to decompress, unwind, and connect with each other. Number 9, live with less. We know, right? The whole minimalist movement is a real thing. People's houses are bursting at the seams with stuff. So much so that they're renting storage facilities to put their stuff in because there's no room in their house for it. It's time to take a step back and live a simpler life. You don't need all of the stuff that you have. And if you run out of something, you can make do with what you have around the house. For example, you run out of Windex. You're in the middle of cleaning your windows for the spring. Vinegar and water works beautifully. Or even better, a window cloth from Norwex. Works great. It's a one-time purchase. You can use it over and over and over again. Make it a game. If you run out of something, how can you do the job with what you have on hand? Number 10, limit your trips. When you're leaving the house, batch your errands. All of the things that you need to do outside of the home can be done in one day, one morning, one afternoon. That way, you don't have to worry about leaving the house again, and all of your stuff has been completed. This will save on time, it will save on money, and it will allow you to enjoy the rest of your week. Now, my grandparents only had one car. That meant when something needed to be done outside of town, it had to be done when my grandfather wasn't working. There were times when my grandmother was able to take my grandfather to work. Not a big deal. They only really lived a few blocks from the mill. But for the most part, all things were done when my grandfather was home. Okay, there's your 10 tips for Depression era habits that you can carry on today to make your life simpler and even save a little bit of money. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Have a great day. Bye-bye.